What's up guys, my name is Sawyer Hartman and I have a Canon 1DX Mark II in one hand and a brand new Sony A7R Mark III in the other hand. And I'm sure all of you, just like myself, want to know which is the better camera. Well, today we're going to find out. Now, I know better than to compare two cameras when I haven't defined exactly what the camera is going to be used for, so first let me do that. Today we are looking for the best travel photo / video camera on the market, and I fully believe it is down between these two. And I said travel, so don't put red camera down in the... You can't travel with this. Travel filmmaking / photography camera. So it's got to be able to do three things. One, does the camera shoot amazing professional level photos, like the best photos you can possibly get of a camera? Does it do that? Secondly, does it shoot video? Because as you guys are on YouTube watching this, filmmaking is becoming a huge part of actually a lot of people's lives. So does your camera do video first and photos second, but do photos as good as it could ever do? And then thirdly is usability. Does the camera have good battery life? Is it heavy? Does it have image stabilization? Is it a pain to use? Does it make you want to jump off a huge bridge? Or does it inspire you to keep creating? Well, those are the three things we're looking for today. So first category, photography. Now, the Sony being a 40+ megapixel camera should have incredible image quality and sharpness. When you're dealing in things like Instagram and digital, a lot of that stuff never gets used unless you're blowing this up for a billboard. In terms of still photos, this camera actually is a beast. Autofocus works incredible even with Canon lenses for photo. But I did try this with a Sony lens and the autofocus is just as fast as the 1DX. It might even be a hair quicker. It's super snappy. But when shooting on Canon lenses, 1 out of every 5 photos was a little bit out of focus. You can have an entire line of Canon lenses and still use this camera perfectly for photo. You do need an adapter. I'm using the Metabones Mark V. Really enjoyed it. However, dynamic range was actually something I was slightly not that impressed with on this camera. Now, Canon says the 1DX has 13 stops of dynamic range. Sony said this one has 15 stops. But all of the photos that I'm showing you here, one of those is Canon, one of those is Sony. Both have been colored with the Instant Banger preset from my preset pack. And to be dead honest with you, I cannot see that much of a difference in dynamic range. Everyone who shoots Canon praises its skin tones, while people who shoot Sony really like the look of it. But actually, in terms of skin tones, I actually now see what people are saying Canon versus Sony. In these photos, you can see the Canon is noticeably better in the highlights and smoothness on the skin tones. I really didn't want to believe that. I've seen so many beautiful photos on Sony that the Canon does have a little bit... Canon skin tones are better. As anticlimactic as it might sound, the Canon 1DX, I have nothing bad to say about it in photo. I wish it had a little bit more of a megapixel count. There's something about that high megapixel count in Sony that makes it look a little extra sharp. But in terms of photography, the 1DX is always in focus 100% of the time. The photos always look good, and I love this camera. I absolutely love this camera, except for the size. Okay, moving on to video. Both of these cameras shoot 4K. The 1DX shoots 4K 60 frames, while the A7R Mark III only shoots 4K 30 frames. I personally don't use 4K 60 frames anyway, so I really don't care. What I care about is 120 frames in 1080. It's what I shoot the majority of my Through My Eyes cinematic videos with, so whatever camera I choose has to have that feature and it has to do it really well. And this is a part of the video where my heart starts to break. Allow me to start with the good on both cameras, the A7R Mark III. So this camera actually has two forms of shooting. It is full frame, which uses the whole sensor, so a 35mm lens actually looks like a 35mm lens, but it also has another feature called Super 35. Now, Super 35 is a crop sensor. I believe it's like APS-C. So supposedly when you shoot in the Super 35mm sensor with this camera, it actually shoots it in 5K video and downsamples it to 4K. Now, I've been shooting on the 1DX Mark II for almost a full year and a half, primarily video only. In fact, this camera has made it so I don't even use the red camera that I have. This is a beast of a video camera. However, there's something about the Super 35mm setting on this camera that just looks cinematic. The 1DX is a beautiful image, don't get me wrong, but it actually looks a little bit more commercial. Shooting on the 1DX Mark II, it only has full frame, but the full frame on this camera is actually as sharp if not a little sharper than the Super 35 on the Sony. The only thing about the Canon is it doesn't actually have a log or a flat picture profile unless you like hack it and stuff. So I hacked mine. I have the flat picture profile. Audio on both cameras, very good. Microphone on the 1DX is right in the front, so wind noise isn't too big of an issue, while the microphone on the A7R Mark III is actually on the side, so it has a little bit of wind noise, but in good conditions, both cameras, completely usable camera audio. The part of the video that just breaks my heart, because the entire reason I've wanted to switch from this 1DX Mark II to the small Sony is because it's a small Sony. I was praying that I could switch this camera to this camera and my workflow wouldn't change, my quality would improve if anything. But we've run into a series of problems here on the video side of Sony. The first issue I have with the Sony video actually has nothing to do with the fact I'm using Canon lenses. It comes down to the slow motion capability. Both cameras shoot 120 frames in 1080, however, the Canon seems noticeably smoother. Now, it's no big fault to the Sony. Most slow motion cameras look a little jittery. Canon just really got it right when they were doing the 1DX's 120 frames. And then I just had to get punched in the face by reality when I tried to use the autofocus feature with Canon lenses on the Sony body. I sound heartbroken right now, but I was very let down. Not only keeping focus while you're shooting video, that's pretty much out the window. It even has a hard time finding focus before you've started recording video. And that is so heartbreaking to me because that case back there is filled with about 25 reasons why I cannot switch to Sony lenses. I did, however, get to use the Sony A7R Mark III with a Sony lens, and it made a huge difference. Autofocus was a lot better. It still wasn't as good as the 1DX, which in my opinion is the best autofocus on the market, but it did a very good job of keeping things in focus. The place that the 1DX shines most is its dual CMOS autofocus system. It's incredible. I can literally tap a picture on the back and it focuses there and it tracks it. So if it's someone's face, they can be walking through a crowd and it stays in focus like perfectly. The Sony it's seriously lacking behind in that category. Also, when the Sony tries to find focus, it's very like that. When the Canon finds focus, it smoothly racks to it. So even if it's not in focus and it goes into focus, it ends up looking like you're brilliant at rack focusing with a cinematic lens. But if you're using a Canon lens on the Sony, just pack up your bags and go home and get ready to use manual focus for video again. Which actually transitions us to the last thing, usability of the camera. And one of my favorite features on the Sony is it has focus peaking and zebra striping for overexposure. If you don't know what that is, it means whenever something's in focus, it traces it in a red outline. So if you had to use manual focus on this camera, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would just be a little less convenient. So Sony's always been notoriously bad at battery life. I shot on this thing an entire day and I still had 66% battery left. So it's not that bad on the A7R Mark III. The 1DX side, like the entire part of the camera that makes it so big is a battery. So this camera literally runs off one battery all day. But then again, do you really want that much bigger of a camera just so you don't have to have a battery in your pocket? Another thing that makes this camera super usable is the viewfinder. It's an actual screen, so you're looking at what your photo's actually gonna look like, and you can also use it while recording video. Way to go. It makes shooting in sunny situations not even like a thought anymore. Also, this has a tilt screen, although this screen's kind of useless to me. Sony did try to do a touchscreen on this camera. I don't think it's as good as it could be. Then the 1DX, the viewfinder sucks. It's optical, so what you're looking through is actually coming through the mirror of the camera. Also, the screen does not come out or rotate, so you're kind of stuck like holding the camera in weird positions. However, what they did get right is the touchscreen. It's extremely responsive. You can even drag from one part of the screen to the other and the focus will rack there. So there's that. If I was not making YouTube videos and I was traveling the world as a professional photographer doing photos only, I really, really like this camera. And if all I was doing is photography, this would be my sweetheart. But that's not the case. Because I run my Instagram and I shoot my YouTube videos professionally and I travel the world shooting both video and photo content for brands and myself, I have to have something that's reliable, that can get the job done time and time again, and that will always be there working for me in the way I know it can. And that is the 1DX to me. Because of the autofocus, because of the extremely beautiful color reproduction and image quality, and then just to top it off with it has the ability to do 4K 60. My choice for the best travel photo and video camera for 2018 has to go to the 1DX Mark II. This is what is going back in my bag, and I have a feeling I will be unfortunately returning the A7R Mark III. I'm so sorry to all my Sony friends who were so excited I was switching, and to all my Canon friends that said I would regret it. Laugh away, Peter McKinnon. You were right. The skin tones are better on Canon. I'm coming back to the family, buddy. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Leave comments down below, topics like things you want to learn, things you want to know about cameras, filmmaking, editing, whatever it is. Let me know in the comments. I'll be doing tons of those all throughout 2018. Subscribe for a new video every week. Stay motivated, stay inspired, and keep creating. Peace.